Do you remember that feeling of being trapped? Maybe it came up when you were small and had to depend on parents like mine, an abusive but absentee father who came and went as he pleased, and an unstable addict for a mother. Maybe you felt trapped in that household. Maybe you had to make decisions that no child should ever have to make. I remember it was dark outside, and my stomach was empty. There was no food in the house, and I had to choose between either going hungry for the night or venturing out of the house, into the dark, into the unknown to find something to eat. Do I choose the suffering that I know, or do I choose the unknown that could potentially be even worse? I recently watched the Backrooms movie, and the decisions that the main characters had to make felt eerily familiar to my own. The Backrooms is a concept that first appeared on Creepypasta, and this revered piece of internet lore involves essentially no-clipping out of nowhere into these eerie liminal spaces. They say if you find yourself in a space you shouldn't be in, like a closed public pool at night or an abandoned mall, you might just end up in the Backrooms. Scary, right? Part 1. Everything has a mirror. The movie focuses on a lonely, angry alcoholic named Clark and his therapist, Mary. Both Clark and Mary have very intense pasts that I believe mirror each other. Clark lost the love of his life because of his excessive drinking, bad temper, and his unwillingness to take accountability for the problems that he causes. Instead, choosing to be steadfast in his stubbornness, and thus never changing or growing. He's alone, trapped in a prison of his own making, but he copes with this by drinking to numb the pain and blaming literally everyone else for his problems. Mary, on the other hand, is introduced to us as a helpless and powerless child with a chaotic and terrifying home life. We see a home that looks cluttered and dirty, every window and door boarded and taped up with curtains drawn tightly over them, so no one can see in and no one can get out. At one point, we see Mary gaze contemplatively at the boarded up windows. We see her start to slowly reach for the handle to open the window, when all of a sudden, her mother appears out of nowhere with crazy eyes, and she's reprimanding her, manically telling her she can never leave. Mary is trapped in this prison, and she has no choice in the matter. She was born into this shitty situation. Clark, on the other hand, created his own shitty situation. Anyway, somehow, through the barricaded doors and windows, Mary escapes, and the last we see of her mother is her getting wheeled away in a hospital gown and psych ward socks, presumably to be admitted into a mental health facility. Mary didn't choose her past, but she made choices to be free from it and to have a much better future. She even goes on to become a successful therapist with her own TV advertisements. Clark, on the other hand, chose his decisions in the past, but he refuses to make better choices now in the present to have a better, more fulfilling future. Although I do think some part of him wants change, because why else would you be going to therapy, right? But I think a bigger part of him wants to stay stuck and have his old habits win out. It's also worth mentioning that Mary's therapy just so happens to be about being trapped behind the glass. She asks the listener if they're tired of feeling like they're just watching life pass by from the window, which is a callback to her traumatic childhood. Clark is constantly watching TV as a way of escapism from his very lonely life. In a way, he's watching life pass by from the window of his TV. Another way in which Mary and Clark mirror each other. In this version of the Backrooms, every single place has a distorted, messed up version in the Backrooms. So for example, Clark owns a furniture store, and in the Backrooms we see a warped version of this furniture store, where all the signs are reversed and mirrored. Keep that in mind for later on. Part 2. The dinner scene. A show of force. When Clark first discovers the Backrooms, he panics and runs to his therapist, Mary, as soon as physically possible to tell her about this different dimension hidden behind the walls of his furniture store. She, understandably, looks frightened by his erratic behavior and unbelievable story, causing Clark to get very upset and storm out after vowing to prove that it's real, and he declares that once he does prove it's real, she'll owe him a huge apology. Eventually, Clark lures Mary back to the Backrooms, attacks her, knocks her out, and when she wakes, she finds herself tied up at a dinner table, facing Clark. He threatens her, demands an apology for not believing him about the backrooms, and forces her to roleplay as his ex-wife, who left him, so he can relive the past and stay stuck. He says he's never felt like he's belonged anywhere before, but he's found that belonging here in the backrooms. For a man that hates change, I'm sure the backrooms is divine, a place that only has copies of what's already happened. There's no future, no change, so Clark can stay stuck in the past and be perfectly content doing so. I think Clark felt like therapy was trying to force him to change and move forward, so he in turn forces Mary to succumb to the past by making her roleplay as his ex-wife. It was a show of force, in the same way that therapy must have felt to him as someone who doesn't want to change or be better. Eventually, after pleading with Clark to let her go, Mary snaps, and she finally tells Clark what she's been holding back this entire time. "Your wife didn't leave you because of your temper," she says, "or your drinking. She left you because you whine. It's not because of how you're wired or because something's wrong with you. It's that you refuse to blame yourself for the problems that you cause." Clark would rather stay stuck, never blaming himself for his mistakes, and assigning blame to literally anything but himself. After all, if you don't cause the problem, then you never have to grow and change in order to fix it. You can stay stuck. It's out of your hands. I think Clark tried to kill Mary because of what she represents to him. Mary opened the window. She was tired of being trapped behind the glass. She represents change and hope for the future, which is the exact opposite of the backrooms and the past that they represent. Part 3. Can we ever truly overcome our circumstance? One thing I felt was especially poignant was the scene where Mary watches her horrific childhood house get demolished. That house might have been in such a bad state, like those that we see on Hoarders, due to the mother's bad mental health, that no amount of cleaning could fix it, so they were forced to demolish it instead. Amongst the rubble, she finds a piece of cement with her child self's handprint in it. We see that Mary, now an adult, keeps this piece of cement in her home on her coffee table. I think it's symbolic of Mary trying to move on. She has this beautiful 90s home and is seemingly affluent and well-off, but she's still carrying around this piece of her trauma from the home she used to be imprisoned in. The handprint cement piece is eventually destroyed in the final battle in the backrooms, when she uses the cement to essentially bash in Pirate Clark's head, don't ask, and escape. Okay, fine, I'll explain. I forgot to mention in the backrooms, everyone has a warped version of themselves. Clark's warped version is a murderous monster who kills Clark and then tries to kill Mary. Mary does eventually escape the backrooms and loses her mind. After the experience, we see a scientist speaking at her while distorted, somewhat silly music plays in her head as she tunes him out. I think this is the same music that played while her mom was wheeled away into a psych ward. Childhood cement relic was destroyed in the backrooms, which symbolizes that the small piece of her trauma that she carried around is now gone, and now her trauma has consumed her entirely. All it took was one more traumatic experience to completely undo everything she worked to overcome. She has unwillingly succumbed to her trauma and is now repeating a generational cycle by ending up just like her mother. At the end of the movie, we see that Mary never fully recovers from being trapped behind the glass. Even though she's done all this inner work and has built a life and reputation for herself, her trauma still wins out. She abuses pills and seemingly is unable to, for whatever reason, start a family, perhaps due to it reminding her of her past. Even though we see her gaze longingly at a happy mother and daughter at a gathering, it seems her trauma won't let her have that for herself. Her trauma is still there and manifesting and keeping her stuck to some extent. But it isn't until the end of the movie that we see her trauma completely break her. I think there's something to be said about the cards that we're dealt as children and just how much we can get away from the past. I often find myself wondering if I'll ever truly feel normal. If I'll ever sleep through the night without waking up sweating, shaking, screaming, and crying. I chose to free myself from being trapped behind the glass. I went to find food late at night as a kid, even though it was scary, alone in the dark. I left home as soon as I legally could. I've done the work. I've done extensive therapy and inner work. I keep choosing change because I don't want to stay stuck. But a part of me fears the ending of the backrooms and what that could mean for people like me. Mary did everything right. She chose change, freedom, accountability, but her trauma still wins, rendering her work useless, all because of her lot in life. I don't have a pretty conclusion for this, and I'm still in the midst of my own story, but I genuinely hope that my choices will completely free me from the circumstances I was born into. I hope that me being born to terrible people will not be indicative of my future. Only time will tell, but I sure as hell won't go down without a fight. He drags him into the bathrooms. He drags them into the back rooms, and he gets them both killed.